So, good morning and or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and a very warm welcome. This is our 21st session on the Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra, Ratnagotra Vibhanga, or in Tibetan, it's called Jut Lama. It's a bit simpler. As always, we start with our prayers. It may not mean something to many of you, but in the Tibetan system, we now just started the 4th lunar month, which is called Sakadawa. Sakadawa is the month in which we celebrate Buddha's birth, Buddha's enlightenment, and Buddha's parinirvana at the end of his life. So the whole month is considered a sacred month, and one of those times of multiplication when what you do has more power, whether it's good or bad. So it's a month to be careful, and a month to do prayers and as much as we can. Although, of course, if you're really a Dharma practicer, that's true every day. Anyway, it's Sagadawa. So what have we got next? Tuesday, we celebrate the birth of the Buddha. And then on full moon, on the same day, it's the enlightenment and the parinirvana. It's the Tibetan equivalent of Vesak in the Theravada system. So let's start with our very, very wonderful motivation. Bodhicitta, turning our hearts in as much love and care as we can to all of our fellow beings, realizing we're here for them, but also appreciating them, because it's only through them that we'll get enlightenment. So it says in one Bodhisattva text, it's a funny text because it says, how do you sit? How do you eat? It sounds like your parents' instruction: don't eat with your mouth open, and how do you sit? Don't make noise when you sit down on the chair and things like this. But it says, how do you look at other people? Which is a very interesting one, because in the Theravada text it says, mainly walk with your eyes down to the ground. You avoid eye contact because of all the emotions that can stir up. But in the Bodhisattva text it says, how do we look on other people? And it says, with the greatest love and appreciation, because it's only through them that you'll get enlightened. So not only are we there to love them and help them in a sort of, altruistic way, but it's only through all the work we do in relation to other sentient beings that we'll ever become Buddha. This is the big message of Mahayana. So we turn our hearts in loving care in both those ways. We're here to help them, but they help us become liberated. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on, until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality, to be able to truly help sentient beings who are so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well. May they live long and be healthy. May they be well provided for. May they have good friends and find respect. May they live in places of peace, places of plenty, and most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for those good circumstances to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering and attain great equanimity that's free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyanta shame shamawati shameta shadru am kurimara jite karote keyorite juwati olayane Peshuda nimale malapanaye kukure kaka grase grasana Omuke paramuke amuke shamandawane sawa graha bandhanane Nigri hidva sawa bara prawadina vimukta marapasha savitva buddha mudra Anudgatita sava mare putsariti parishuddhe Biga shantu sava mara kama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our head on lotus and moonseed, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So today we should finish this chapter on Buddha nature, on what is in Sanskrit Gotra. And so a couple of things. One, thank you, Paul, for pointing out that between the last session and the session before, I didn't go systematically through about 10 dozen verses. I covered the meaning when we went through the chart that you've got in the text, that went through the 9 examples of the outer shell, the lotus round the Buddha, the bees round the honey, the husks round the grains, and so on. I covered the general meaning, but I didn't go through the verses, so it's good to make a complete transmission of the text. So today we will go through the verses, but it's a good opportunity to highlight a point which comes back when we go into the remaining verses of this section to the end of the Buddha nature teachings. And it's about the context of this text. And so it's something I often say, maybe too much, but I'm going to keep on saying it, and is that we can study Dharma like you study a topic. And indeed, some of my old friends and colleagues, they've gone on to be university teachers, and they teach Dharma in various ways as a topic. It's fine, but for me, my interest in these teachings, and I think the general theme in the Kagyu lineage too, is we are not interested in study for study's sake, and we should be very cautious of the idea, I understand. If you think you understand, you don't. As far as I can guarantee anything, I can guarantee you that. And I think every time you think I've understood that, or I know that, well, if it was me, for myself, I can't recommend it for you, because that's up to you. But every time you think I know that, or I understand it, give yourself a good slap round the face and tell yourself, I don't understand it. You have digested a concept, finished. You don't understand a thing. or only a tiny bit. The real understanding comes through practice, meditation, your own Dharma maturity, and you will have your mind blown. The simplest things you thought you understood, they will come to life, they'll become truer and truer, more vivid, and it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And in the end, the first things that we learn in Dharma, precious human existence, you will treasure your existence every second, every moment. It will be the rarest of jewels, the greatest of treasure. And until that's happening, there's no point knowing precious human existence and 21 points, 10 assets, 8 freedoms, 3 types of faith. You know it. You know that you tick the boxes and you qualify. But until every moment of life is like a treasure, it's like how it would be if you knew you were going to die in an hour's time, how much you'd savor your last hour. So you don't know it in your heart, and thinking I know that, and especially when you think I know that because you've heard it before. So you think, oh, I've heard that before, and you shut off your mind. That is ignorance. There's no other word for it. And so we have so much to learn. So with that in mind, when we study the Buddha's teaching, but what are we studying? Whatever was gathered of the Buddha's teaching after he was gone by some people as an oral tradition and only set down in writing centuries later, we have a fraction of what the Buddha did. And what is marvelous is that these days we have wonderful living masters. I mean, what I can share with you, because I suppose that's what these teachings are about. I've spent most of my life with some very, very great teachers. I've seen them at work, and this gives an amazing insight as to how it must have been when Buddha taught. You see, these teachers, they teach people, and each person is so different. Their needs are so different. Their capacity, their ability is so different. And there's no point giving people practices they can't do, they can't accomplish, they don't understand, or giving them teachings which are too high for them or too low for them. So when you're with a really good teacher, they are just amazing. Each person gets what they need. So when we think of Buddha's 45 years, and some of his main disciples were already, when they came to him, great masters in India, masters of yoga, masters of meditation, had a lot going for them. When you think of all he taught, we know that what we have as Buddhist ideas, Buddhism, the stuff that's in the books, the sutras, the tantras and so on, is a glimpse. It's not the whole thing. And so when we look at the Buddha's teaching, and as we saw earlier in this course, we analyze the whole of his teachings in what we call the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma, and we're looking basically at 3 main groups of his disciples and their needs and their abilities. And so what he gives them, what they get in return. I really wish that somehow I could just plug you in to my experience of 50 years, whatever it's been, of great teachers teaching each individual. It's just amazing. It's amazing. It's so varied. And the people who get the basic teachings They could never imagine what the more gifted disciples with good karma receive. They wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't even know it exists. It says in some of the tantras, it says in the Bodhisattva teachings, those on the Hinayana path don't even know the names of some of the teachings, let alone the actual content. So for me, it's a very important thing to understand that. And when we look at the 9 examples of these outer things which hide up something precious on the inside, then as we go through them, part of it is about arhats. So I want today to talk briefly, although it's a big topic, about the path to becoming an arhat. And when we look around us our Dharma brothers and sisters in this world, in different Buddhist communities, and we can understand it, why the Buddha taught that path. So when you see people who come to get Buddhist teachings, they are very different, as I've said many times. Some people are so naturally loving and kind, when they meet suffering. What is it Tolstoy says? If you can feel pain, you're alive. If you can feel other people's pain, you're human. It's a wonderful quote. It's not Buddha, it's Tolstoy, but never mind. It's very true. Some people, they're so naturally caring and attuned to others. It's already there. They're so ready for the Bodhisattva teachings. Other people don't have that. Other people are a bit scary. It's often they've been burnt by other people in their family, other people in human relationships, love affairs, whatever it is. People have hurt them, and but they can be very, how can you say, sharp. I'm thinking of the Scottish word canny. They really, they know, they see suffering, they get it. Desire and anger and so on gets us into trouble, and so much of it didn't need to happen in the first place. Then you see it in yourself. You don't want it to happen, but anger happens, desire happens, jealousy happens, stupid waste of time happens. You come to the end of a day and you think, gosh, how I wasted today. I didn't really do anything. It was kind of stupid level, just feeding your senses day. And so on. So people are very varied. So some people say, why didn't the Buddha teach the Bodhisattva path, which is so wonderful and so complete, to everybody? Well, had he done that, he would only have had a very limited number of customers, of disciples and followers. And by teaching what we call the Shravaka path, Hinayana path, whatever you want to call it, Buddha could help so many more people. He could help them to master and free their own minds. When we read the Mahayana teachings, the Bodhisattva teachings, sometimes they don't speak very kindly about the Shravaka and the Hinayana teachings. It kind of gives you the impression of looking down on them. This is to give us confidence in the Bodhisattva path. But we have to be realistic. It's such a relative, large, sliding scale. It's like richness, for instance, or health. Maybe richness is not a good example these days, but anyway, let's try richness, right? The scale is endless. You can be the richest person, and not just in terms of money. You know, you're lucky, you're fortunate, everything works, you've got friends, good health, money, you can do what you want. Anything you want. In the bay here, when I look out the other day, there was a $400 million yacht. And not that big, just for 10, 12 guests. It's one of the founders of Google who owns it. So there's that kind of richness, which for me is, in terms of richness, whiz up there, right? But then given me, I've got a roof over my head, a nice house, I've got a garden, I eat every day well, I can still walk and see and use my 5 senses. For some people, I'm luxury, they don't have the health, they don't have the wealth, and they're struggling, and then that can get worse and worse to where people are starving and in total poverty. So when we hear the Buddha's teaching to bodhisattvas about arhats, it calls it a lower path. But that's the Buddha teaching great bodhisattvas. From where I am, the arhats and shravakas path is way up there. They've done so much more than I've done. They conquer their mind. They've gone beyond desire. Have you gone beyond desire? They've gone beyond anger, frustration, jealousy, all these things, removed forever from their stream of consciousness. They've found peace of mind. When you meditate, can you hold your mind without distraction for hours, days, in total peace, beautiful peace? And in that peace, they've gone through physical bliss, incredible physical bliss. They've gone beyond that to mental bliss. They've gone beyond that to beautiful equanimity. From where I sit, they are way up there. And we see in, for instance, the Tibetan system, how they venerate the famous 16 arhats. Maybe you've seen the 17th come up as drawings of the 16 arhats. Great, it's a beautiful little drawing. He's a wonderful artist, and each one's got a lot of character. And sometimes in Thongka paintings, faces look pretty much all the same. They're very uniform. Here you've got real humans with a lot of character. And the Tibetans respect them as great benefactors. So when we read the Bodhisattva teachings about the Hinayana path, we need to understand that it's the only way that certain people can follow. They want to master their own minds. They want to free mind from the hold of samsara, but they don't have the fuel, what it takes to follow this bodhisattva path that depends on everybody else and working with other people so that you can finalize the 6 paramitas. So their path is one of shutting down everything. In Samiling Temple, above the doors, for legal reasons, health and safety, you have these signs, green signs that say exit, right? Exit, the way out. If you're going to leave existence, that's pretty simple. You just need to get to the door as quickly as possible and get out. That's your one and only task. If we take it as an example, it's not a very good example, but let's take it as an example. Sameling Shrine Room can hold about 300 people comfortably, right? A lot of people, each person with their own stuff, right? Baggage, right? You can either go to the exit and get out as quickly as possible, or the only way out is to work intensively with each person in the room, to learn what you can learn from each one, to help each one as much as you can help them. And only then are you allowed out. Can you see the difference? Yeah. So different. Out is out. Out means you shut down your five senses, which bring you the desire and the anger and the aggression. You forget about the senses. You are in mind itself. And you develop an incredible strength of serenity, and you go through, when you're just in mind itself, beyond the senses, the possibilities of bliss as your chakras settle and that kind of thing. You go through to equanimity. So we need to understand why the Buddha took the Arhat's path. So that's all I'm going to say more or less today. He did give a famous example, which is often quoted, and he explained that the path of the Arhat is a sort of halfway house to enlightenment. And he explained it through an example where merchants from the center of Asia are going to go to, they set off in a caravan to go to the ocean, to go to the sea, because in the sea there are riches, there are corals, pearls, and abalone shells, and all the sort of things you can sell in Central Asia for a fortune. And so these gang of merchants set out, and they go, and a part of the way they have to cross a desert. And they've been going for weeks, with the caravan. There's dangers, they're tired, sick, and fed up, and some of them say, it's like kids in the car, are we there yet? And the leader of the party says, no, we're only halfway. And some of them think, I want to go back, this isn't worth it. And so the leader of the caravan can see the whole adventure is collapsing. Fortunately, in the example, the leader has what they call magical abilities, which these days I think we call hypnosis. So he hypnotizes the whole lot, right? Mass hypnosis. And they find themselves in this wonderful oasis. It's got everything. It's beautiful, food, the water, the people there. They get a really good rest. So after a week or two in this hallucination, they're all, come on, let's go, let's get on with it. We've got out of our blues and we want to go to the ocean. So in the example, then they all get to the ocean. They all gather riches, they go back home, make a fortune, happily ever after. Okay, Hollywood example. And so then at the end, all the credits roll, all the credit to the leader of the caravan. So it says like this: many people, if they started out on the Bodhisattva path, could never make it. They'd never have the courage. They'd never be able to cope with all the work of helping others and learning from others. But they can cope with the work of meditation and very pure conduct, so that they can go into a state where their mind is freed forever. So that's called nirvana, of suffering. It's freed forever of suffering, but it hasn't yet realized the great cosmic truth of being, which is what this text is about, the true nature, the Buddha nature, the truth of mind. But they're in a wonderful state of equanimity, which for them they think is the end of the path. They think they've done all that needs to be done. So it says, these are like the merchants. The state of equanimity and samadhi that they're in, the peacefulness, is like the magic city created by the leader of the expedition. And once they're awoken from that, then they can go into the bodhisattva path like a rocket. They don't have any more mind poisons. They've dealt with those. They're all gone. They're great masters of shamatha. So now their shamatha can be upgraded with vipassana and insight. So they really go very, very well. So we need to understand the place of the arhats. And I'd like to share a little story with you. It's when I took the 16th Karmapa to one of the Theravada viharas around London. I think it was the Burmese vihara. Okay, so by that time, I'd been studying Dharma a while, and in particular Gampopa's teachings. So in my mind, I'm thinking Theravada, the lower way. We're the bodhisattvas, and not just that. We are Vajrayanist, and here's the Karmapa. So I was arrogant, I suppose is the word. The Karmapa, who read all the time, he knew what you were thinking. He looked at me so I can't describe what it's like to be him. It's like you're talking in your mind. It's like you talk with words, but you don't need the words, right? And it was no. And then he turned round and he put his hand together and he bowed to them. I felt so, well, that's a lesson and a half you're never going to forget. And from where we are, we cannot look down on the Shravaka path, the Theravada path, the Arhat's way. We can only have wonderful respect for what they do, their purity of conduct, their mastery of meditation. It's a wonderful example for us. But we're on the Bodhisattva path. So I wanted to say that about the way of the Arhat. Then later on today, we'll come to a conclusion of this chapter where we look at these teachings on Buddha nature compared to the general Mahayana path of the 6 paramitas and Nagarjuna type shunyata. And we'll see, how can you say, a similar sort of contrast between bodhisattvas and arhats and between people who realize these teachings and the general mainstream Mahayana. So let's quickly look at those verses that I skipped through the previous time. So we're going to verse 135, and so we actually went through 134, which is about the first example of the lotus that's hiding a real Buddha inside. And we saw how that represents desire. The lotus, which is so beautiful at first, so it represents desire. It's so lovely. You want it. You're enjoying looking at it. Or we could take something like just now here. It's the end of cherry season. Cherries, when they're in the market, on the stall, and they're so perfect and shiny, and just to look at, they're like rubies, and beautiful, different light-coloured ones, dark-coloured ones, they all look, I want it. And so you buy them, and then you eat them, but if you don't eat them quickly, then, after a day or two, they still look good, but they've got little worms inside. If they're organic. And then after about 4, 5, 6 days, they don't look so good, and you don't want to eat them. And they end up, you put them out for the birds who eat the cherries and the worms inside and, everything else. Similar example. This looks when we desire something, you want it because it's so attractive. But it doesn't stay like that. And once you've got it, the whole thing gets rotten and the relationships go rotten and things aren't what you hoped they would be. So we did that one. So now verse 135 was about the bees around the honey. And it says, when they're irritated, bees sting. Likewise, anger arises and brings but suffering to the heart. So here we're looking at so-called anger, hostility, but it covers so many types, from like long-term, slow burn resentment, that you can carry all your life. You resent your family, you resent your parents, you resent where you were born, you resent what happened at school, or there's that slow burn always there in the background. Hostility, that's what we mean. It's what hurts. There's a conflict inside. There are all sorts of conflicts inside us, all sorts of dichotomies. So we're looking at all of those, up to actual anger and getting angry and saying angry things. But there are so many forms of anger, irritation, that we see in the Abhidharma teachings. So it says, like bees that sting. And I mean, the point of these examples is for you and me to think about them. We don't just say, bees sting, right, anger hurts, finished, I've understood. No, you didn't. No, you didn't understand a thing. Go out there, look at bees, think about the sting, think about how they protect their hive. Listen to the buzzing, listen to the buzzing, listen to the buzzing of anger and resent inside yourself. Feel how it's there, see how it's there when you meditate. Think of this is like the bee is protecting the honey. Somewhere inside this anger, resentment, irritation in my mind, there's something so beautiful to discover. We need to explore and explore and explore again in all sorts of ways, and especially if you're doing Vajrayana teachings of instant transformation, Yidam practice and so on. We need to be with these examples until they really, really come to life. And when you see it in other people, somebody comes up, you can see they're upset. The man who lives next door to me has done that again. Buzz, buzz, buzz. You can hear the buzz, 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 and it's stinging them. It's hurting them. It's hurting them. So anyway, so it says, that's what that example is about. Verse 136, just as kernels of rice and other grains are covered outwardly by husks and skins, so is the vision of the very essence obscured by the shell of ignorance. So there, we already looked briefly at the example, but this one's about ignorance. It's about not knowing. You all heard it. And the problem with not knowing is we don't know what we don't know. Or we do know what we don't know. That's already a start. I know that there is quantum physics. I've got the vaguest of ideas what it talks about, and all the today you see stuff, string theory and all this jargon, but I don't really understand it, like a quantum physicist. So there I know what I don't know, but I don't know it. That's already a start. Because 100 years ago, nobody knew anything of any of this. There was real ignorance about biology, about physics. So like that, ignorance. We have to think the example of grains in their husks. Go out and look at grains growing, look at the grasses growing around, and see how All you see, all we're aware of, is the husk. You need to know that there are grains inside that you can harvest and process. We think about the history of humanity, from hunter-gatherers to farmers and so on. All of this, many things to think about, to try and understand, and then to meet the reality of it in practice when you sit down and meditate. Ignorance is a hard one to describe, but you can at least recognize it when you're sleepy and when you're kind of dull, because you know those moments when you've been like awake and bright. And I had a nice bright moment this morning. I chose my words carefully. It was a moment. And so you can tell by the bright moments how dull you are the rest of the time, because you're not that awake, you're not that so clear and feeling so peaceful and centered and exactly in the right place. It's such a shame it's moments, but those moments help us to recognize when we're kind of, meditating and doing our best. But it's a kind of sleepy, confused, half-stone, drunken mess where we're trying to be Buddhists. We're drunk without the alcohol. We're drunk on wandering mind. So anyway, that one to think about. Now the next example, the dirt over the buried gold, the rubbish heap. Filth is something unpleasant, akin to it, the active state. So this is all the mind poisons, those 3, or if we have pride and jealousy, 5, or the 21 subsidiary ones, that makes 26, or 27 sometimes. So filth is unpleasant. The mind poisons in the active state are unpleasant. You don't want it. It's there, but you don't want to get involved with it or into it. So it says, the active state causes those who are involved to indulge in gratification. Gratification. This means satisfying. Satisfying what? Mainly your 5 senses. When you look into it, what you want to hear, what you want to see, what you want to feel in your body. You want to feel satiation rather than hunger. You want to hear that the people you don't like have been thrown out in politics or whatever it is. If you look closely, gratification comes through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, physical experience. That's why we have the mind poisons. They're intimately linked to the play of our 5 senses. So when they're in the active state, when they're actually active, although they're unpleasant, we can't resist them. We want to get the satisfaction of overcoming the enemies, getting what you want, and so on. So we need to recognize that as rubbish. It's so easy today. You have endless publicity, endless people trying to sell us something. And it's coming in. Once you've got a screen, once you're out there, publicity all the time, people telling you, if you had this washing powder, life would be so much easier. Your clothes would be so clean, you'd be so attractive, and it's new and it's improved. They've been making washing powder new and improved since I was a boy. You wonder what you can do to washing powder to make it that much better. But they still tell the lies. It's even better than it was before. And anyway, they're talking to your senses, telling you, if you had this, you'd be happier. If you had noise-cancelling earphones, you wouldn't hear what you want, what you don't want to hear. You can shut the world out, and so on. If you look into it, then it's what's meant to be attractive. If you look around you, it's what people are spending their lives running after. Getting rid of. Get rid of the smells from your house. Have this in your bathroom, this in your toilet, this under your armpits, whatever it is, get rid of that. Get this. So for the worldly view, things are desirable. From the Buddhist point of view, it's a lot of rubbish. It's like this pile of rubbish that's been built up over the gold. The gold isn't about the senses, it's about deep in your mind. There is beauty, perfection, everything you could ever want. So that's about the defilements in their active state. Verse 138, when the wealth was covered over, they did not know and could not obtain its treasure. In a similar way, the spontaneously arising is concealed by ignorance's latent traces. So this one's about the arhats, right? This is this example. So before we had the defilements in the active state. In this example, which is the treasure that's under the poor person's house, right? So this is quite a dramatic example, and it's what I was saying, that's from the Buddha's point of view and from the point of view of great bodhisattvas, the arhats live in poverty. From our point of view, they live in wealth. But from that enlightened point of view, they live in poverty. So they're like the man who lives in the pauper's hut, who doesn't know there's a treasure buried underground. So when we look at the difference between the arhat's path and the bodhisattva path, we see the arhats get rid of the mind poisons, they get rid of the ego beliefs, which are the cause of the mind poisons, they achieve serenity, mastery of meditation. But compared with the type of meditation the bodhisattvas do, and the meditation the bodhisattvas do uncovers mind's wisdom about itself. So like the treasure which is deep underground, deep within our mind, and then specifically deep within the shamatha mind, deep within the mind that is so peaceful, so blissful, that feels so perfect in one way. When you sit and you get shamatha, it feels so good, doesn't it? You feel so like this is it, this is perfect. Everything else seems like a disturbance, distraction, trouble. You feel so balanced. But we need to go deep, deep inside that with the teachings like Mahamudra teachings to uncover the true wealth of mind, the love, the compassion, the Buddha wisdom, and so on, that we'll discover in the next chapters. So what this means is that the duality which leads to the mind's poisons is not fully overcome. For the arhats, there is samsara, one thing, nirvana, freedom from samsara, another thing. They've escaped, they've gone out, they've gone through the exit. There's outside, and there's the shrine room example. There's back there in the busy shrine room, and you get out the door, and it's a beautiful starry night, quiet and peaceful. So there is this latent duality, possibility, that they don't know is there. They don't know it's there. That's what that example is about. The next example, the seed which breaks through the fruit, through the husks of their grains and so on, a gradual growth. This is about the breakthrough of the first bodhisattva level. So we looked at that, and there's this, how can you say, wonderful moment when the stone inside the fruit makes a little growth, and that growth comes, and there's that moment it pierces the shell. You know, it's like when a chick breaks out of an egg. It's kind of peck, 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 and then poof, all of a sudden the beak comes through. The world becomes huge. I don't know if we can imagine what it's like to be a little chicken. I mean, you're inside an egg. You're completely like this. And then bang, bang, bang. And then, whoa! There's like such a different space. So we're not looking at chickens here. We're looking at mangoes and so on. But the little shoot breaks through, and then it's a different world, and you're on the way to becoming a big tree. First bodhisattva level example. And then we did that one. Then verse 140, those who by following the path of the realized have overcome that very path, the beliefs that the destructible and multiple is a self, still have obscurations to be abandoned. Through the primordial wisdom of the path of cultivation, these have been illustrated like the tattered rags. These were the rags around a very precious statue. So there we're looking at the first 7 bodhisattva levels. We're looking at the path of cultivation and what they call the destructible and multiple is a literal translation of a word for the 5 aggregates. Our 5 aggregates, form, feelings, cognition, samskaras, and consciousness. These are the 5 areas of who we are, what we are. It's called the 5 aggregates which naturally attract suffering. So it's seen that there is no self in those. No self, no other. So that's compared to the tattered rags. Verse 141, the impurities which remain in the first 7 levels are compared to the impurities in the confines of a womb. So now it's the example of the destitute woman who's pregnant, who's got a future king in her womb. Release from them is like freedom from that womb, whereas non-conceptual jhana is like finally maturing. So it's emerging from the mind poisons, and every latent trace of mind poison means the mind poisons can't get you anymore. They can't overtake your mind, but they still occur, they still pop up, and they need to be eroded away. It's a long, long task. It's a war of attrition where they just need to come up again and again, and they get the no thank you response. No thanks, no thanks. It's like publicity. We learn to not even look at it, not even listen to it. But when you get those phone calls, trying to sell you something, you try and be polite and put the phone down as quickly as possible. We need, through this war of attrition, to actually wear out the power of all of our mind poison baggage down to the finest level, first seven bodhisattva levels. The impurities in the 3 profound levels, bodhisattva levels at 8, 9, 10, should be known as similar to the traces of clay on the statue. That was the last example. These are eliminated by the Vajra-like samadhi of the great self. Vajra-like samadhi we do from first bodhisattva level onwards. Samadhi means absorption. Vajra-like means we're absorbed in the true nature of our mind, in the truth of who we are, in what we call here Gotra, Buddha nature. That will never change. That nature has never changed. And by simply remaining in it, so much happens. And especially when we get to bodhisattva levels 8, 9, 10, that will be our main meditation tool. Simply staying perfectly, totally, unwaveringly in the truth of our mind. That gets rid of the last traces of dualistic split in our mind. It's the only way. Just like letting in the first 7 levels, the traces of our mind poisons come and go until they're just worn out and disappear all by themselves. In the last 3 levels, by staying in Buddha mind, the remaining dualistic tendencies of mind fade away. So verse 143, the summary, just says these 9 impurities correspond to the lotus, and so on. So that was to fill in for those verses that we saw. We ended last time on verse 153, page 177, that this ultimate truth is to be known by faith alone. So we did that. Verse 154 is a very, very famous verse. This is a verse to get tattooed on your mind. And you could tattoo it on your body, but you're going to leave this body. So better to tattoo it into your mind. Very, very famous verse. It's the essence of this entire text. It comes from it's found in 2 places, the Sri Maladevi Sutra and the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, very famous one. Both of them famous. There is nothing whatever to remove from this, nor the slightest thing thereon to add. Truly beholding the true nature, when truly seen, complete liberation. You'll find different translations of this verse, like here you've got truly behold, there's the same word 3 times. Truly beholding the true nature when truly seen. You could say perfectly beholding the perfect nature when perfectly seen. It's in Sanskrit, in the original, it's what's called an upsaga. Upsaga is an adjective, I think, but it means really the best, the most perfect, the purest, the finest, the most excellent. Any of those terms, upsagas, bring into the text. So it's when there's the very, very, very best beholding, or excellent beholding, or pure beholding, perfect beholding of the nature which is pure, perfect, the very best, and so on. Then when it's very purely, very perfectly, very excellently seen, that's it. Liberation. That's it. Because, first 2 lines, that's it. There's nothing we need do to it, to add to it. There's nothing that needs taking away from it. That's it. When you truly behold this truth of yourself and truly see it. So truly behold is the action, how we meditate. We need to learn to truly see our inner truth. And when it is truly seen, that's it. That's Buddha. And it's what, of course, our Mahamudra and Dzogchen teachings are all for. So that verse is very, very famous, and in a way, all of the 400 verses of this text are telling us why that's the case. Verse 155, this element, dhatu, is devoid of transient things to be purified, that have a character separable from it. It is not devoid of the ultimate qualities, which are of a character indifferentiable from it. There's a lot in that verse too. And we've come across it before. It's called the twofold purity, or the twofold nature. What it's saying is, this has nothing to do with what obscures it. So for us, it's all mind. We always use this word mind, the truth of mind. And then we talk about mind poisons, duality of mind. It all sounds like, it's all about mind. And many of the teachings you will see and that lamas give and so on is about mind and recognizing the truth of mind. Now, there's a lot here. I'm not going into it today. It's about practice and mindfulness, awareness, what within the relative stream of consciousness, which is changing all the time, which is generated by causes, and its cause and effect, how one part of that stream of consciousness can be aware of another. So consciousness is aware of what's going on. And so in there you can, how can you say, you can explore awareness deeper and deeper and see that awareness of what's happening in the moment is not the same as what's happening in the moment. You have this light of awareness, but that's still within your stream of consciousness. It's not what we're talking about with Buddha nature, but we need it as a tool of mindfulness and awareness to go through the stages of the path. But we have to be very careful with this thing about awareness and the true nature of your mind, because we can mistake the true nature of relative awareness for what's being talked about in this text, and it's not. It's not. It's a wonderful gift. You get that far, it's up there, you're doing well. But this self-awareness, awareness of what's happening in the moment, is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here, you won't get to. You're like the seed breaking through the skin of the fruit, or like the chicken coming out the egg. It's huge. It's different. So what it's saying here is, this Buddha nature has nothing to do with what for us covers it up. Our mind's busyness, our feelings, our thoughts, this stream of consciousness, which like those 9 outer examples is constantly covering it up. The true nature of our mind has nothing to do with those at all. Their nature is not the nature of the Buddha nature of our mind. Whereas it says the qualities in this Buddha nature, and that we'll look at in the chapter after next, Buddha qualities, and so on. And we look at next chapter about enlightenment. These are, and have always been, and always will be, part of the truth. The Buddha's wisdom, love, compassion, peace, light, all of those things are naturally there. We don't make them through our path. We don't make enlightenment. The qualities are always there. Now, the main point for us about this verse is that the true nature of mind is not just like a blank sheet of paper. It's not like an unprogrammed microchip. It's not neutral. the true nature of mind, as in the 9 inner examples, is so rich in qualities. This is why this text is the basis for Vajrayana, where these qualities manifest as Tara, as Chinrezig, as Buddha, all the different forms. You see, when we do ordinary meditation and we develop mindfulness and awareness, and it says, mind. Masters would tell you, your mind is like space, and clouds and everything come and go, white clouds, dark clouds, all that kind of stuff, Meditation, teaching, people sit down and mind is like space, and stuff comes, stuff goes, but space is neutral. Space isn't kind and loving like Buddha is. When we meet our really good spiritual masters in this life, they are naturally, uncontrivedly, so loving, so wise. They're not neutral. No way. And when we want to become Buddhas, do you want to become a blank space? Duh. A lot to think about in this verse, really, really. And especially not just to think about it, but then to understand how that informs our own meditation practice, our yidam practice, our different things we do. What's going on? Why are we doing it? So now we move on to the next section, the 4th section in these Buddha nature teachings. I've often said, there are 3 points. The 3 statements, the 10 explorations, the 9 examples. It's true, I should have said 4, but this is the sort of conclusion. It says, why? Why is it important to learn about these teachings? So it says the purpose of these. Verse 156, page 179. Buddha taught in various places that every knowable thing is ever void, like a cloud, dream, or illusion. Why, therefore, did the Buddha declare the essence of Buddhahood to be present in all beings? So this verse is contrasting the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, or the first and second turning of the wheel of Dharma, with this third turning about, so it says, having taught the first turning and the second turning, having taught about ego, mind poisons, liberation from those forever, having taught about prajnaparamita, duality, and so on. Isn't that it? Why this third turning about Buddha nature? And in particular, after all those teachings about no self and no duality and so on, then now, why teach about this ultimate self? Remember, in the verses we already covered, it says, this is the true identity. This is permanent. It's so different from the rest of the Buddha's teaching. There's no ego, there's nothing which has its own existence, in particular there's no ego, everything is impermanent. So then, having taught all of that, and it all makes a lot of sense and people practice it, gives rise to all the bodhisattva path, the Shravaka's path, why teach this about, in the end, you've got an ultimate self? Isn't this what Buddha's been contradicting all the time? So this is a very, very deep topic. We only touch on it here. And it says over the page, verse 157, page 180, there are 5 mistakes we might make. Faint-heartedness, contempt for those of lesser ability, belief in the false, slandering the true meaning, and self-cherishing, so that those in whom the above 5 mistakes exist may rid themselves of those mistakes. That's why it was declared. So now as we practice our Buddhist path, we must be on the lookout for 5 errors we can make. This is very practical, it's very, very, very useful. Verse 158, the ultimate and true nature is always devoid of any compounded thing. Therefore it is taught that defilement, actions, and their full maturation are like clouds, and so forth. This is an introduction to the general Buddhist teachings, first and second turning. It's unpacked in the next verse, verse 159. So it says, this is interesting, you might not know this. You've probably heard, it's like clouds, and like dreams, like a magic show, and so on. But the defilements are taught to be like clouds. Karma is likened to the experience in dreams. And the full ripening of karma and defilements, our aggregates, are likened to conjurations, magic show, hypnosis. So this is summing up the first 2 turnings of the Wheel of Dharma. Cause and effect, so you know it by now. It's ignorance causes duality, that causes self and others. Self and others causes the defilements make us act. Action, karma, brings its results, which is rebirth with the 5 aggregates. So in that, clouds are intangible and unpredictable, coming and going unexpectedly. Easy, we see that. Weather, in these days we've got satellites and predictions, but go back to Buddhist time. You just are where you are. You haven't got satellites telling you what's happening with clouds all over the world. It's what's going to happen next. Clear day, then all of a sudden a little bit of cloud, then before you know it, thunderstorm, and so on. So that unpredictable nature, like clouds, is the defilements. Anger, all of a sudden something upsets you. Desire, you see something, hear something, and then desire happens. It's like the coming and going of clouds. When because of that, we act with body, speech, and mind, then this is like dream action. Our subjective reality, which is so subjective. Your world, the way you define other people, the way you define the world, the way you define you, different for everybody. So for you it's real. For you the world is the world. It's not. It's your world. For you, Ken Holmes is Ken Holmes. But I'm not whatever I am in your mind, I can guarantee. Even those of you who know me well, if only you know. So what you call the world and other people and what you call you, it's like in a dream. It's so convincing. It's so totally 360 degrees, full Dolby stereo, convincing illusion. So that's where we act. In a dream, something's a nice fruit, you pick it. Somebody's an enemy, you fight them, and so on. And then the full ripening of our action is like conjurations. It's like the power of a hypnotist. We are living now with the results of our past karma. It's like what we did in past lives has hypnotized us into this reality now. It conjures up our present reality. So verse 160, thus it was presented previously. Previously means in the first and second turnings of the Wheel of Dharma. And then the element exists, Buddha nature exists, this dhatu exists, was taught ultimately as not just the third, but the final turning of the wheel of Dharma, as this continuum, the continued presence of Buddha nature. Now, continuum in Sanskrit is Tantra. So the meaning of Tantra in Sanskrit is like the unbroken thread. Whether we recognize it or not, the true Buddha nature of our mind has always been there, an unbroken thread through all our existences. And when we remove our baggage, stream of consciousness, called samtana in Sanskrit, there'll be nothing but that left. So this continuum, so that these 5 faults could be abandoned. So verse 161, first fault, not learning this, some people are disheartened through mistaken self-contempt. Bodhicitta will not develop in them. So you think of yourself as rubbish. You only experience, well, the mess that we are, the soup of consciousness that we are. And we might not be very happy about ourselves. And we need to know, like Taisitupa tells us often, you are Buddha. That's who you are, really. You're wonderful, you're perfect. So much goodness inside you. We just have to bring it out, like in all those 9 examples. Get the treasure out the ground. Let the tree grow from the fruit, and so on. We need to know about the goodness, the perfection inside us, to give us courage to do the first part of the path, which is the hardest. And once our path starts to work, you get meditation experiences, you get more and more affirmation of all that you're doing. It's heartwarming, it's encouraging, gives you courage. The first part of the path's the hardest. We need so much faith and trust in the teachings. So if we know and if we learn more and more about who we truly are, this Buddha nature, then we won't get my negatives worked out. We will be able to go into the path of the Bodhisattva, and we won't think, how could somebody like me, you see whoever it is, Dalai Lama, Karmapa, you hear about wonderful altruistic beings, and you just feel like you. How could I ever be like that? Somehow it feels like they're different. They're a different species. Well, they've got some different DNA biology that makes them wonderful humanitarians. We're all the same inside. Any one of us, properly helped, can become Buddha. And I really hope all of you will become Buddha before me. Don't forget me when you do. What's that song? If I get to heaven before you do. No, if you get to heaven before I do, dig a hole and pull me through. Right? Yeah. So that's the first mistake. Verse 163, second mistake, right understanding cannot arise in those who think like this. Since they misrepresent the true, they will not understand the truth. So this is about the second mistake of thinking of a personal self. All this thing about self and no self that the Buddha teaches, we need to understand. It's profound. It takes work, it takes meditation, it takes study, reflection. I mean, not like stupid Buddhists who go around saying, I don't exist, you don't exist. That's stupid beyond stupid. Makes no sense. If I don't exist, who's saying it? If they're telling you you don't exist, who are they talking to? And then what does exist mean in their mind? They've not thought about it, explored it, understood it one bit. So the way we need to understand it is just like this book is telling us, something so pure and perfect inside, covered up, as we had in those 9 examples and as the 10 points explained to us. So we need to understand we do have an identity. I like this bit. We have an identical identity. Id, this Latin root, id, self. Who I really am is who you really are. Not just similar. That's mind-blowing. I'm you and you are me. Ooh. We have an identical identity, which is wonderful. We don't have a personal self, which is a fantasy we've created, which is a prison we've created, which is an illusion we've created. That, Buddha tells us, is the cause of all the trouble. But then we do have a true identity, which is this timeless, changeless, enlightened nature, liberated nature of mind. And we learn through these teachings to look on each other as that. I am you. You are me. It's extraordinary. Looking at you, I see the truth of myself. This is how bodhisattvas look on other beings. So, not that mistake. Verse 164, beings' defects are not truly real, as they are but a fabrication and incidental, transient, fleeting. In reality, the faults are not solid entities, whereas the qualities, the goodness, the virtue, the kindness, the love, the wisdom inside us comes from this true inner nature. If one clings to, then verse 165, if one clings to the false, the untrue, and disparages the qualities, the true, one will not have the loving kindness of the wise, which sees the similarity of oneself and others, is what I was just talking about. When you realize we're all Buddha natures wandering around, covered up with a bit of illusion, Ken illusion, I won't say any names, but I've got all your names on the list there. Your illusion, my illusion, we're all the same. We're all Buddhas. But if we cling to the faults, then we will see fault. And it's, don't have time today, and when we do 7-point mind training, and we learn about the value of not seeing fault in others, not criticizing. There's such benefit in it, because we are, part of our conditioning, our programming, is to see faults, to see others as wrong, to see others as limited, to see others in a critical way, rather than to see them as Buddhas. This is a huge topic. We can't go into it here. But the Buddhist bodhisattva training is to learn to see the Buddha in everybody. Relate to that, not the passing stuff of who they are now in this life and previous life. So we see others as past mothers and friends, heart friends, and we see other people as future Buddhas. And then if you have some experience of Buddha nature through meditation, we have a heart resonance with everybody, because everyone we meet, it's like heart to heart meeting the truth of yourself in somebody else. So this is the fault of the critical mind. And you'll see this in yourself, you'll see this in your Buddhist companions. And then the last one, verse 166, through learning in such a fashion, there arises enthusiastic diligence. You'll be enthusiastic and you will love your Dharma practice, because it's really taking you to the truth, it's getting you free. And respect for everybody, for everything as Buddha. There will be prajna, jhana, the two forms of wisdom, and great compassionate love. So we look at the summary on the bottom of page 184. Instead of faint-heartedness, somebody like me could never get enlightened, we've got enthusiastic diligence. Yes, that's who I really am. Number 2, not pride, where we think we're better than others, because we're Dharma people, precious human existence, we're doing pretty well. We will see everyone as the same on the path. We respect everybody as though they're Buddhas. Instead of belief in the non-true, ego, we'll have wisdom of no self. And instead of denial of a true self, Buddha nature, we'll have primordial wisdom. And instead of self-cherishing, we'll have mature love. So the last verse of this section, verse 167, due to the growth of these 5 qualities, unhealthy aspects will be absent from our practice, our mind, and the similarity of everybody and everything will be seen. Through faultlessness, innate qualities and loving kindness, which recognizes the similarity of self and other, Buddhahood will be swiftly achieved. Well done, one way or another. Now we've got through this Buddha nature chapter. Next week is the first Saturday of the month, so it's our monthly Tonglen training. So we come back to these teachings in 2 weeks, and there we'll start the chapter on enlightenment. That chapter will be, you'll find many of the same notions coming back. It's the way this text works. It's like, looking at me. Just now you see me full face on, right? If you turned me sideways, and then you'd see the profile, you'd see my nose, and you'd see my hair is quite up at the front and quite flat at the back. If you turn me around 180 degrees, you'll find I've got mainly grey hair. So you'd say Ken's got grey hair. If you look at me from the back, I've got a dark-haired patch at the back. We turn the thing round. So we've been looking at who we really are, what mind really is in terms of our Buddha nature in this chapter, our potential. We'll be looking at very similar things, step by step, in a similar way, cause, fruition, and similar titles, but now in terms of what is enlightenment. So let's dedicate whatever was good and useful today, and indeed up to now in all of our 21 sessions, let's dedicate it for everyone's benefit. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained, by the main enemy, our mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become free, from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not yet arisen. In those in whom it has arisen, may its development know no setbacks. May it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Thank you. Well, now it's your turn. And if you've got something you'd like to add or question, then there we go. And just like to say hello to those of you I didn't say hello to at the beginning.
Hi.
Yeah.
I know I've asked this question before, but I just don't find, in myself the answers I was given all the time. Like it makes sense, the answers, and I believe in them and all of that, but I just can't make myself see as a Buddha someone who behaves like a monster. And we are not short of those people. And not only that, I find it even dangerous because some people try to go there, and I think it's not helping anyone, and it makes someone even in a spot of danger because it's an illusion. So, I mean, in the Buddhist teaching, it's not an illusion, but for us in everyday life, try to think of a terrorist, oh, he's got a Buddha nature. It's okay, it's just some defilements there. I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah. All of these teachings give us so much to think about, and at the very basis of all of these bodhisattva teachings, because this text is part of the bodhisattva teachings, it's not really a Vajrayana text. So all these teachings give us a lot to think about, and the key to all Mahayana is called the two truths: relative truth, ultimate truth. And the key to the Shravaka path is the four truths. They call them four noble truths, or the four truths of noble beings. That's the key to all of the Shravaka path. The key to the Bodhisattva path is two truths: what's going on ultimately and what's happening relatively. And there's just so much to understand, and you can't just understand it intellectually. We have to do what you're doing, which is to look at life and say, like here, how can this be true? Does a terrorist have Buddha nature? For one thing, we need to explore that, see what Buddha says, see what our teachers and the various texts like this text tell us, and then we need to reflect on it. Can I believe this? Do I believe this? If I don't believe it, is there something that I need to learn? Or have the teachings got it wrong? And so on. We need to explore not just what is said, but its relevance to us and the life that we experience. And so, do they have Buddha nature? We need to explore that. And that's on the ultimate level. And then what's happening on a relative level, this level of our conscious experience, like in these three examples, like the clouds, like the dream, like a magic show. How is this working? Why is this world in which I'm born and in which there are very horrible people doing terrible things to other people and so on. What is that in terms of the Buddha's teaching? How does relative reality work? And then in all the very vast Bodhisattva teachings about cultivating the 6 paramitas, then how can I evolve from this? What is right conduct? Right conduct meaning what should my attitude towards these harm doers be? So we need to explore that in terms of the teachings. So what I see often is that there is a statement which is Buddhist, like all beings have Buddha nature, but then we have to be very careful about the conclusion we draw from it. Because they have Buddha nature doesn't mean that they are Buddhas. They have Buddha nature, they have a potential to become Buddha in some future life. So when we explore that, as we did briefly here, as we do more extensively in Gampopa's teachings, we see all beings have Buddha nature, all beings have it the same. Third point, there are 5 levels of potential. The first level is called covered up potential, where not just it's covered up, but what beings are doing right now is covering it up even more. It's called the cut-off potential, the covered up or the cut-off potential. And so then, through the extensive Bodhisattva teachings, how do we relate to them? We don't relate to them like Buddha. We try to understand the relative reality we're in, and what is our moral responsibility towards those people, their victims. What's our own moral responsibility towards ourselves in terms of attitude? How can we make our mind more mature, more free, more wise, by using the presence of those people to understand ourselves and how we project onto people. So there isn't a simple answer. If there was a simple answer, Dharma would be so easy. It's not. We're given tools of exploration because we're working with our own mind. My mind's different from your mind. So there we have to take these tools and try and make some sense of them. And then in each case, terrorists is an extreme example, a very powerful one. But in everyday life, when we've got in our family and in our neighborhood and in our workplace, we've got difficult people who do unkind things, who create ego territory and things like that. What's my role as a Buddhist? People say, do you just let them walk over you because you're a Buddhist? Do you react? Do you create boundaries? Do you say something? Not all of that we have to work out with good advice. There's no one example. We've got all the Buddha's advice, and then with this person or that person or this situation, we have to do our best. But one of the big teachings of this text about Buddha nature, and as we saw in the 10 points, is the fact that everyone has Buddha nature does not mean everyone's Buddha. It means they have the Buddha potential, and until it's worked on, we can't treat them as Buddha. We treat them as people with Buddha potential. And put in simple everyday terms, we try and see the goodness in people. We try and relate to that, thinking just now they're a monster. But whatever is good in there, we want to try and nurture it. And whatever is damaging in there, causing suffering and causing them future suffering, can we help in any way to get rid of it? It's a rambling answer, Yale. I wish I had a simple answer, but I don't. But what's important for us in this text is to realize how many lifetimes we go through, how many hundreds, thousands, and maybe we were terrorists at one time in the past. Maybe we did such horrible things to people. Maybe we were in religions that did human sacrifice, animal sacrifice. Maybe we were soldiers in wars and so on. To try and understand how long this journey is and how we're relating to the long term of somebody, while in relative reality, being very realistic about what's going on just now and what can or can't we do about it to help them and to help ourselves. Does that help at all, or not really?
Yeah, again, in theory, I understand it very well, and the thought that I've been myself something like that is always on my mind. But in order sometimes, many times, in order to deal with such human monsters, we have to kill them.
Well,
That's the only solution.
I don't know. That's what we have to ask ourselves. As if we really are committed Buddhists, it's not totally out of the question. There was the story of a Buddha in a past life, this famous story when he was on a ship and he had to kill someone to save hundreds of people on the ship. It's not out of the question, but it's not the obvious answer. The only thing to do is to kill them.
Well, they come with intentions, but we are not mind readers yet, and we don't know who is has a potential to listen. They just come and do atrocious things.
Yeah.
So,
but do you know the karma of that person and the people like someone who does atrocious things now? If we believe in karma, they will be reborn and atrocious things will happen to them. And in those future lives, we'll only see them in their reincarnation, maybe even as children, with atrocious things happening to them. It's huge to understand, but it's the reality of what's going on around us. And it takes a lot to believe the Buddha's teaching and even more to practice it. But then, what do we do? This life is where we learn.
There's this fear that if you try to do that, and it makes a lot of sense, of course, if you just try to do that, you're putting yourself in danger because you don't have the resolve to
No, I'm not saying you should put yourself in danger. I'm not saying we can help them even one bit in their present state of mind. Maybe the only thing we can do is think there is some connection because they hurt people, they hurt me, they hurt people I know, or even I'm in this world where I'm witnessing the hurt they're giving. Through that connection in some future lives, may we come together and can I help them? And just now practically, what can we do? Basically, the Buddhist path is one of non-violence. And it means we're not violent to others, but we're not violent within ourselves, where we think that the answer is to hurt others. It's huge. This parameter of right conduct is
the answer in the sense of what you said about this lifetime of the Buddha, that he had to kill them in order to save the 500. This is what I mean. This is where I hope I am.
Yeah, but in that story, the Buddha was already a bodhisattva, and he knew the past karma of the person. He knew the outcome if that person wasn't interrupted and killed those, all the suffering that person will go through. So with all of that clarity of mind and knowing that he had not one bit of hatred, resentment, anger towards the person, but only love and compassion. There are, I think, 5, when you analyze it, 5 different circumstances in that story, which meant it was okay for the bodhisattva to kill somebody to save others. It doesn't mean that as soon as we've taken the bodhisattva vow, it's okay to kill people to save others, because what's going on is, if somebody's got the karma to be killed, they will be killed. I remember there was a lot of controversy around the time Akon Rinpoche was killed. Some lamas said, it's the fault of the disciples. They didn't keep their samaya, they didn't say their prayers, and because they weren't doing everything, that's how he could be killed. I didn't agree, although they were lamas, they were Rinpoches who said that, because Rinpoche himself had said to me before he left for Tibet, and it wasn't the first time, if it's my karma to be killed when I'm there, it's my karma. It's my karma. He said that with no doubt. And he went knowing he wouldn't come back. He went knowing he'd die. And he said, if it's my karma, so when he was killed, he kept the bodhisattva mind. And there's a very powerful teaching he gave in 1992 during the Nyungra years at Samiling, where he more or less talked about those circumstances and how a bodhisattva would face being murdered and the state of mind. And it looks like he did that. And so that is enormous. But, if it's somebody's karma to be killed, such a strong karma, nothing will stop it. Karma is enormous. So it's not that we just sit back and say, oh, well, it's just their karma to be murdered in a terrorist attack. It's just their karma to be terrorists. But we do need to understand the factor of karma in those as much as we can.
Could you define what it means, love? Like compassion, I can understand, but what's the love? How can you love them?
Love means you only want the best for them. Love is very clearly defined, is you want that person to be well. Now, when we do our beginning prayers here, what well means, love is defined in these prayers we do. There's what are called the 7 worldly worlds. We want them to live long, to be healthy, to have all they need, to have good friends, to be respected, to be in a place of peace, both mentally and physically, a place where they've got all their needs, so they need nothing to strive for and fight for, they're satisfied. Those 7 worldly worlds are what we mean by love. We wish them not just to have that, but we want them to be creating the causes so that they have those 7 worldly worlds in a future existence. Love means that's what we wish for them. In one way, it's not at all emotional, like human love, when you fall in love with somebody. It's not like that. And especially if we do know one day that person can become Buddha, we're longing for them to be doing the right things rather than the wrong things they're doing now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ken. I notice V has put up a quotation from Karmapa: "Killing terrorists won't kill terrorism." That's interesting. In terms of recent Irish history, it was often said that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
Yeah.
It depends from which side of the conflict you're looking at. And maybe from a Buddhist point of view, one can see that, putting it crudely, both sides are committing atrocities, and that one realizes that both sides are creating terrible suffering for themselves in the future.
There's that to it, yeah, as well, I think. And, this is where we come. I'm sorry to always sound so technical, but it really is where we come to these 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. Because the first turning is the world's always going to be like that. People will be fighting each other, falling in love with each other. It's never ending. And, this one persecutes this one in this life, and in a future life, because of the karmic connection and resent, that one persecutes the other one. It could be endless. And so all we can do is just get out, which is the way of the arhat, is the exit. The bodhisattva way is, how can we stay in this mess and do something that's helpful, that liberates us, but also that, that helps the world? And then how would that work? And that's a huge area. I mean, there's no easy answer. No easy answer to that. And then the Vajrayana way is something extraordinary and something else again, which we won't go into here. But the answer to violence being violence, I don't know.
Maybe do some Tonglen for them.
Sure. I need to look at.
And I have just a practical question. Are we going to use the same link for this class in 2 weeks?
Yeah, same link.
Okay.
I think I extended it. At first it was, we were coming to the end. Now I think I've made this course indefinite, so there are links going endlessly into the future on Saturdays.
Yeah, thank you.
Ken, if I might just have one question, which is related to going and listening to teachings. And we're very blessed in the West that there are many teachers who come to visit us. And sometimes the topics they teach about are far beyond our personal comprehension at this current time. And my question is there any benefit in sitting in teachings which are just really PhD level when you're primary school? Is there some kind of blessing involved in it, or dharmic connection, or what? Do you know of any advice around that?
I think it depends very much on the person. I mean, if we know the topic beforehand, then surely you'd only go to something that you think would be relevant to your own practice. Just like if you are doing A levels or O levels, then you wouldn't be going to a PhD lecture on something. Normally, you'd be wanting to get the information and whatever it is that can be directly helpful to you. Sometimes it's of help because it gives us a whiff, a taste of where the whole thing's going. It's like you do go to a PhD lecture on quantum physics, not with the hope of understanding everything, but and there it's deeper and more subtle. You'll go along to it and think, it's not my thing, and so you're not going to bother to do the O levels and the A levels and the ordinary university degree to get you up to there, because it's not your path. It's like me. I'd chosen chemical engineering for the wrong reasons, and at one point I had to face the fact this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life, and drop out. So it does give us a clue, and then deeper than that, then there is a question of, it's called sacred connection or affinity, whereby even if there's not much tangible benefit in the information, nevertheless the person who is there, in their presence, they embody what we will call the lineage, and somehow we do feel that something very rich and special and quite subtle has been a benefit. You come out, you sort of glow, even if technically you can't see why you should be glowing. But it's the same thing. It's a question of affinities, and the same thing. You could go to a very eminent teacher and there's just no connection. This has happened to me often. You go to somebody, their CV is incredible. They're supposed to be Lama this and this, emanation of Buddha, what's his face, and something else that, and they've the CV is amazing, and you go along and you think, there's zero connection here. There's just nothing happening, and so you don't bother. Even sometimes there's a bit of this, and I must say I've been very lucky with my, how can you say, inner sniffing, because I was beating myself up because I was going to lamas and they had these excellent CVs, and I thought, yeah, I don't get it, not with this person. And then 10, 20 years later, it turns out they're not who they were blown up to be. They're the ones the lamas who've gone wonky. And I think, thank goodness you felt this kind of, I don't want to be connected there. So this inner affinity is something wonderful. And with really good teachers, I've seen, and people have come to me afterwards, after they've died and so on, and they say, I only saw him for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but something changed, or he's been there ever since. And they can't understand it, because the other people who are sort of years, like you, they say, you were lucky, you were with him all the time, all of this. But how can it be? Should I, include that person in my refuge and things like this? And say, yes, of course, because in the end, that heart connection with the lineage, which is what a real Lama is, the sales representative for the lineage. They travel in kaju, or that's just what they do. That's the fast track.
Thanks.
Welcome. Okay, well, thank you all very much. We did our dedication, so I wish you a good week. See you next week if you're on the Tonglen tribe, and if you're not, then maybe see you in a couple of weeks' time. All the very best. Take care.
Thank you.
Very much, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Rana.
Ken. Thank you.
Draw everyone.
Thank you.